What if time simply forgot you? Picture a world where everyone grows older, except for one child. In a quiet American town in 1907, Clara Bell stopped aging at 8 years old. As decades slipped by, her friends became adults, her parents grew old, and the world transformed. But Clara remained unchanged, a living riddle. Scientists, doctors, and skeptics from around the world came searching for answers, but none could solve the enigma of the girl who never grew old. Tonight we unravel the haunting case of Clara Bell, a true story that will challenge everything you think you know about life, time, and the mysteries that still linger in the shadows. In the spring of 1907, Maple Hollow was a place where nothing much ever changed. The town was small, tucked between rolling hills and thick woods, with a single main street lined with tidy shops and whitewashed houses. The people of Maple Hollow were proud of their quiet lives. They knew every neighbor, every dog, every secret. Or so they thought. On the edge of town, in a cozy yellow house with a picket fence, lived the Bell family. Samuel Bell was a carpenter, known for his gentle hands and easy smile. Edith, his wife, was a schoolteacher before Clara was born. Together, they had built a life filled with love, laughter, and hope. Their only child, Clara, was the light of their world. Clara Bell was a bright, curious girl with blue eyes that sparkled like the summer sky. She loved to chase butterflies in the garden, climb the old oak tree in the yard, and read fairy tales by the fire. She was quick to laugh, quick to forgive, and always ready for an adventure. To her parents, she was perfect. That spring, Clara turned 8. Her birthday was a simple affair, just a cake, a few friends, and a new book from her mother. She wore a yellow dress and a ribbon in her hair, and she blew out the candles with a wish she never told anyone. Her parents watched her with pride, never imagining that this birthday would be the last one she would ever truly have. As the months passed, Samuel and Edith noticed something odd. Clara's friends began to change. They grew taller, their faces lengthened, their voices deepened. They lost teeth, outgrew their shoes, and started talking about things Clara didn't understand. But Clara stayed the same. Her hair never seemed to grow longer. Her shoes never wore out. Her face remained round and childlike, untouched by time. At first, Samuel and Edith brushed it off. "She's just a late bloomer," Samuel said, ruffling Clara's hair. "You were the same way, Edith, remember?" Edith smiled, but worry flickered in her eyes. The seasons changed. Summer faded into autumn, and autumn into winter. Clara's friends started school, but Clara stayed home. Edith taught her to read and write, to add and subtract, to paint and sew. Clara was a quick learner, but she never seemed to grow bored or restless. She was content to be a child. But as the years went by, the truth became impossible to ignore. Clara was not growing at all. Samuel took her to Dr. Harris, the town's only doctor. Dr. Harris was a kind man with a bushy mustache and a gentle touch. He examined Clara from head to toe, checked her height and weight, listened to her heart, and asked her to wiggle her toes. "She's healthy as can be," he told the Bells. "But I've never seen anything like this." The Bells tried not to worry. They told themselves that Clara would grow in her own time. But as her friends became teenagers, then adults, and Clara stayed the same, the whispers began. At church, people glanced at Clara and then looked away. At the market, neighbors asked Edith if everything was all right. Some people were curious, others were afraid. A few even called Clara a miracle. Clara didn't understand why people stared. She just wanted to play, to read, to be with her parents. She didn't know she was different. One day, as Clara played in the garden, a group of children gathered at the fence. They watched her for a long time, whispering to each other. Finally, one of them, a boy named Henry, called out, "Why don't you ever get any bigger, Clara?" Clara looked down at her hands, then at her feet. She didn't know what to say. That night, Edith sat by Clara's bed, brushing her hair. "Do you feel all right, darling?" she asked. Clara nodded. "I feel fine, Mama." "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" Edith smiled, but her eyes were sad. "Because you're special, Clara. You're not like anyone else." Clara thought about that as she drifted off to sleep. She dreamed of flying, of running through fields that never ended, of growing tall enough to touch the sky. But when she woke up, she was still 8 years old. As the years passed, the Bells grew more worried. They wrote letters to doctors in the city asking for advice. Most never replied. The few who did sent back polite, puzzled notes. "Children grow at different rates," they wrote. "Give her time." But time was the one thing Clara didn't seem to have. One winter, Samuel built a new set of shelves in Clara's room. He measured her against the wall, marking her height with a pencil. "We'll see how much you grow this year," he said, trying to sound cheerful. But the mark never moved. Edith kept a diary, recording every detail of Clara's life. March 3rd. Clara's hair is the same length as last year. April 10th. No change in her shoe size. June 1st. Clara still looks 8. The pages filled with hope, then worry, then fear. The Bells tried to keep their worries from Clara. They smiled, laughed, and played with her as always. But at night, after Clara was asleep, they sat by the fire, holding hands and wondering what would become of their daughter. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Samuel looked at Edith and said, "What if she never grows up? What if she stays like this forever?" Edith's eyes filled with tears. "Then we'll love her forever," she whispered. But deep down, they both knew that love might not be enough. As Clara's friends grew up and moved away, she stayed behind. She watched as the world changed. New families moved in, old houses were torn down, and the town grew quieter. But the Bell house remained the same, a place where time seemed to stand still. Clara's world grew smaller. She played in the garden, read her favorite books, and helped her mother with chores. She watched the seasons change, but she never changed herself. One day, a stranger came to town. He was a tall man with a black coat and a notebook in his hand. He asked questions about Clara, about her family, about the day time seemed to stop. He took notes, nodded, and left as quietly as he had come. After that, more strangers arrived, and some were kind, others were skeptical. They asked to see Clara, to measure her, to take her picture. The Bells refused at first, but the strangers kept coming. The town began to talk. Some people said the Bells were hiding something. Others said Clara was a sign from God or a warning. The local pastor visited often, praying with the family and asking for guidance. Despite the whispers, Clara remained cheerful. She played in the garden, read her favorite books, and watched the world go by. But as her friends grew up and moved away, Clara stayed behind, forever 8 years old. Her parents aged, their hair turning gray, their faces lined with worry. But Clara's face never changed. She was a living mystery, and the town could not look away. As the chapter closes, the world outside Maple Hollow is about to take notice. What will happen when Clara's secret is no longer just the town's to keep? And what will Clara herself feel as strangers begin to arrive, searching for answers she doesn't have? But as the years passed and Clara's friends changed while she stayed the same, the world outside Maple Hollow began to take notice. What would happen when strangers arrived, searching for answers? In the next chapter, you'll see how a small town's secret became a worldwide mystery, and why some people began to fear what Clara truly was. The town's secret. Maple Hollow was a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was a place where secrets were rare, and when they did exist, they never stayed hidden for long. The story of Clara Bell, the girl who never grew old, was no exception. By the time Clara should have been 10, her story had already become the town's most whispered secret. At first, the townspeople watched the Bells with a kind of gentle curiosity. They saw Clara playing in the garden, her laughter ringing out like a bell, and they smiled. She was a sweet child, polite and friendly, always ready to help her neighbors. But as the years passed and Clara remained unchanged, the smiles faded and the whispers grew. Some people were fascinated. They brought their own children to the fence, pointing out Clara and telling them to be kind. "She's special," they would say, as if that explained everything. Others were wary, crossing the street to avoid the Bell house, muttering about curses and omens. A few, the most superstitious, began to avoid the Bells altogether, afraid that whatever had happened to Clara might be catching. Clara's parents did their best to shield her from the gossip. Edith kept her close, teaching her at home and filling her days with lessons, stories, and chores. Samuel worked longer hours, hoping to provide a sense of normalcy. But even inside their cozy yellow house, the whispers found their way in. Clara was not oblivious. She noticed the way people looked at her, the way conversation stopped when she entered a room. She heard the whispers at the market, the questions at church. Why doesn't she grow? Is she really the same girl? What are the Bells hiding? The words stung, but Clara tried to ignore them. She focused on her books, her garden, and the love of her parents. But as her friends grew up and moved on, Clara's world grew smaller. The children she once played with became teenagers, then adults. They got jobs, married, and started families of their own. Some moved away, chasing dreams in distant cities. Others stayed, but drifted apart, their lives moving forward while Clara's stood still. Clara felt the distance keenly. She missed her friends, missed the easy laughter and shared secrets of childhood. She tried to make new friends among the younger children, but it was never quite the same. They looked up to her, but they didn't understand her. She was always the outsider, the girl who never changed. Her parents worried about her loneliness. Edith invited neighbors over for tea, hoping to keep Clara connected to the world outside their home. Samuel took Clara on long walks through the woods, telling her stories of his own childhood. They did everything they could to make her feel loved and safe. But love could not protect Clara from the curiosity of the town. As the years passed, the whispers grew louder. Some people began to suspect that the Bells were hiding something. They wondered if Clara was really the same girl or if the family was playing a trick. A few even suggested that the Bells were keeping Clara locked away, refusing to let her grow up. The local pastor, Reverend Thompson, became a frequent visitor at the Bell house. He prayed with the family, offering comfort and guidance. He told the townspeople that Clara was a blessing, a reminder of the mysteries of God's creation. But even his words could not quiet the rumors. One summer, a traveling salesman came to town. He heard the story of Clara Bell at the general store and decided to see for himself. He stood at the fence, watching Clara play in the garden. When Edith came out to greet him, he asked, "Is it true what they say? Has your daughter really never grown?" Edith smiled politely, but her eyes were wary. "Clara is a healthy, happy child," she replied. "That's all that matters." The salesman nodded, but the next day he told the story in the next town over. Soon strangers began to arrive in Maple Hollow, hoping to catch a glimpse of the girl who never grew old. At first, the visitors were few and far between. They came quietly, standing at the edge of the yard, watching Clara with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Some brought gifts, Dolls, books, sweets, hoping to win her favor. Others asked questions, probing for details, searching for a clue. Clara was polite to the visitors, but she found their attention unsettling. She didn't understand why they were so interested in her. She just wanted to be left alone to play in her garden and read her books. As the number of visitors grew, the town's curiosity turned to concern. Some people worried that the attention would bring trouble. Others feared that Clara's story would bring shame to Maple Hollow. A few saw an opportunity, hoping to profit from the town's newfound fame. The local newspaper ran a story about Clara, calling her the girl who never grew old. The article was picked up by a larger paper in the city, and soon letters began to arrive from all over the country. Some were kind, others were cruel, a few were simply curious. Clara's parents tried to protect her from the attention. They kept her home more often, limiting her time in the garden. They asked the neighbors to respect their privacy, but the whispers continued. Clara felt the weight of the town's curiosity. She became more withdrawn, spending hours alone in her room, reading and drawing. She missed her friends, missed the days when she was just another child in Maple Hollow. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Clara sat on the porch with her mother. "Mama," she asked, "why am I different?" Edith took Clara's hand in hers. "You're not different, Clara. You're special. And sometimes being special means people don't understand you." Clara nodded, but the answer did little to ease her loneliness. As the years passed, the town's fascination with Clara only grew. More visitors arrived, some from distant cities, others from nearby towns. They came with cameras, notebooks, and questions. They wanted to know everything about Clara, her favorite foods, her hobbies, her dreams. Clara answered their questions politely, but she longed for privacy. She missed the days when she could play in the garden without being watched, when she could walk through town without hearing whispers. Her parents did their best to shield her, but the world was closing in. The story of Clara Bell was no longer just Maple Hollow's secret. It was becoming a story that belonged to everyone. One day, a letter arrived from a doctor in the city. He had read about Clara in the newspaper and wanted to examine her. He promised to be discreet, to respect the family's privacy. Samuel and Edith debated what to do. They wanted to protect Clara, but they also wanted answers. After much discussion, they agreed to meet with the doctor. He arrived a week later, carrying a black bag and a notebook. He examined Clara carefully, asking her questions and taking notes. He was kind, but his eyes were sharp, always searching for a clue. When he finished, he shook his head. "She's healthy as can be," he told the Bells. "But I've never seen anything like this." The doctor's visit was the first of many. Over the next few years, more doctors, scientists, and reporters came to Maple Hollow. Some were kind, others were skeptical. They examined Clara, took samples, and asked endless questions. But none could explain her condition. The attention took a toll on the family. Samuel grew frustrated, Edith grew anxious, and Clara grew more withdrawn. The town, once a place of comfort, now felt like a cage. But through it all, Clara remained resilient. She found solace in her books, in her garden, and in the love of her parents. She learned to ignore the whispers, to smile at the visitors, and to find joy in the small moments of everyday life. As the chapter closes, the world outside Maple Hollow is beginning to take notice. What will happen when Clara's story reaches beyond the town's borders? And how will Clara herself cope with being the center of a growing storm? The whispers in Maple Hollow were only the beginning. What would happen when Clara's story reached beyond the town's borders? And how would Clara herself cope with being the center of a growing storm? Next, the first outsiders arrive, and their questions will change everything. Don't miss the moment when curiosity turns to obsession. Subscribe and keep watching for the secrets that are about to be revealed. The First Visitors. The year Clara Bell should have turned 12, Maple Hollow was no longer just a quiet town tucked away from the world. The story of the girl who never grew old had begun to ripple outward, carried by letters, rumors, and the occasional bold visitor who came to see for themselves. For the Bells, life was changing in ways they could never have imagined. It started with a letter from a doctor in the city. He had read about Clara in the local paper and wanted to examine her. Samuel and Edith debated for days. They wanted to protect their daughter, but they also wanted answers. In the end, they agreed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone could explain what was happening to their child. Dr. Alden arrived on a rainy afternoon, his black bag in hand and a look of polite curiosity on his face. He was kind, but his questions were endless. He measured Clara's height and weight, checked her reflexes, and peered into her eyes with a small flashlight. He asked about her diet, her sleep, her dreams. He took notes in a small leather-bound book, his brow furrowed in concentration. Clara sat quietly through it all, answering his questions as best she could. She was used to being examined. Her mother had checked her temperature and measured her height so many times she had lost count. But Dr. Alden's questions felt different. They were sharper, more insistent, as if he was searching for something hidden just beneath the surface. When he finished, Dr. Alden sat with Samuel and Edith in the parlor. "She's healthy," he said, "but I've never seen anything like this. I'd like to bring a colleague to see her, if you'll allow it." Samuel and Edith exchanged a worried glance. "We'll think about it," Samuel replied. But word had already spread. Within weeks, another doctor arrived, and then another. Some came from nearby towns, others from distant cities. They brought with them strange instruments, thick books, and theories that ranged from the scientific to the supernatural. One doctor, a tall man with a heavy German accent, insisted on taking a lock of Clara's hair for analysis. Another, a woman from Boston, spent hours talking to Clara, asking her about her dreams and her memories. A third, a professor from a university, brought a team of students who took notes on everything Clara did, from the way she walked to the way she laughed. The Bells' home became a revolving door of visitors. Some stayed for days, others for only a few hours. They filled the house with questions, with the smell of pipe smoke and the sound of scribbling pens. They left behind stacks of notes, promises to write, and more questions than answers. For Clara, the attention was overwhelming. She tried to be polite, to answer every question, but she longed for the quiet days when it was just her and her parents. She missed her garden, her books, her old life. The townspeople watched the parade of outsiders with a mix of fascination and suspicion. Some welcomed the attention, hoping it would bring fame or fortune to Maple Hollow. Others resented the intrusion, worried that the town's secret was no longer its own. At church, Reverend Thompson preached about the dangers of pride and the importance of humility. "We must remember," he said, "that some mysteries are not meant to be solved." But even he could not resist the urge to peek through the Bells' window when a new visitor arrived. As the months passed, the questions grew more personal. Some visitors asked about the Bell family's history, about illnesses and tragedies that had touched their lives. Others wanted to know about Clara's childhood, her friends, her fears. A few even asked to see the marks on the wall where Samuel had measured Clara's height year after year. Edith tried to shield Clara from the worst of it. She kept her close, reading to her in the evenings and taking her for long walks in the woods. But Clara could feel the weight of the world pressing in. She saw the worry in her mother's eyes, the tension in her father's shoulders. One night, after a particularly long day of questions, Clara sat on the porch with her father. The stars were bright above them, and the air was cool and still. "Papa," Clara asked, "why do they all want to know about me?" Samuel sighed, pulling her close. "Because you're special, Clara. Because you're a mystery, and people are afraid of what they don't understand." Clara nodded, but she didn't feel special. She felt tired and a little bit lost. The next morning, a reporter from a big city newspaper arrived. He was young and eager, with a notebook in one hand and a camera in the other. He asked to take Clara's picture, promising it would only take a moment. Clara stood in the garden, her yellow dress bright against the green grass. The reporter snapped a photo, then another, asking her to smile, to look serious, to turn this way and that. When he was finished, he thanked her and left, his notebook full of quotes and his camera full of images. A week later, Clara's picture appeared in newspapers across the state. The headline read, "The Girl Who Never Grew Old." The story described her as a living wonder, a puzzle that no one could solve. The article brought even more visitors. Some came out of curiosity, others out of hope. A few brought gifts, dolls, books, sweets, hoping to win Clara's favor. Others came with questions, with theories, with demands. One man, a self-proclaimed healer, insisted that he could cure Clara. He brought with him a bag of herbs and a bottle of foul-smelling liquid. He asked Clara to drink it, promising it would make her grow. Clara refused, and the man left in a huff, muttering about ungrateful children. Another visitor, a woman dressed all in black, claimed to be a medium. She said she could speak to spirits, and that Clara was a child caught between worlds. She spent hours in the Bell's parlor, lighting candles and chanting in a language no one understood. When she left, she told Edith that Clara was a soul out of time. The visits took a toll on the family. Samuel grew frustrated, Edith grew anxious, and Clara grew more withdrawn. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now felt crowded and tense. But through it all, Clara remained resilient. She found solace in her books, in her garden, and in the love of her parents. She learned to ignore the whispers, to smile at the visitors, and to find joy in the small moments of everyday life. As the months turned into years, the visitors kept coming. Some stayed for days, others for only a few hours. They left behind stacks of notes, promises to write, and more questions than answers. The town, too, was changing. The old ways were fading, replaced by new ideas and new faces. But the story of Clara Bell remained, a living legend that no one could explain. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Clara sat on the porch with her mother. "Mama," she asked, "do you think I'll ever grow up?" Edith hugged her tightly. "I don't know, Clara. But I do know that you are loved just as you are." Clara smiled, but her heart was heavy. She wondered what her life would be like if she could grow, if she could change, if she could be like everyone else. As the chapter closes, the world outside Maple Hollow is beginning to take notice. What will happen when Clara's story reaches beyond the town's borders? And how will Clara herself cope with being the center of a growing storm? The answer, as you'll see in the next chapter, is that the world is about to descend on Maple Hollow, and Clara's life will never be the same. Doctors came with their tests and their theories, but none could explain Clara's secret. What did they miss? And what would happen when the world's most famous scientist set his sights on Maple Hollow? In the next chapter, the world's attention descends on Clara, and the mystery only deepens. Stay tuned, because the answers you seek are about to get even stranger. The world takes notice. The year was 1921, and the world was changing fast. Automobiles rumbled down city streets. Radios crackled with news from faraway places. and people everywhere seemed hungry for stories that defied belief. In the midst of this whirlwind, the story of Clara Bell, the girl who never grew old, caught fire. It began with a single article in a national magazine. The reporter, who had visited Maple Hollow months before, wrote a piece titled, "The Child Who Defies Time." He described Clara as a living wonder, a medical mystery, and a symbol of hope in a world that was still healing from war. The article included a photograph of Clara in her yellow dress, standing in her garden, her eyes bright and her smile shy. The response was immediate. Letters poured in from every corner of the country. Some were kind, filled with prayers and well wishes. Others were skeptical, accusing the Bells of trickery or worse. A few were desperate, from parents whose own children suffered from strange illnesses, begging for answers. But the letters were just the beginning. Soon the world's most famous scientist took notice. Among them was Dr. Emil Kruger, a renowned physician from Europe who had solved some of the era's greatest medical puzzles. Dr. Kruger was featured in a viral video decades later called "The Most Bizarre Medical Mysteries Ever Recorded," and Clara's case was always at the top of the list. Dr. Kruger arrived in Maple Hollow with a team of experts, strange machines, and a reputation for brilliance. He was tall and thin, with sharp eyes and a voice that commanded attention. He spoke several languages, carried notebooks filled with theories, and had a habit of pacing when he thought. The Bells were nervous but hopeful. Maybe, they thought, Dr. Kruger would finally have an answer. For weeks, Dr. Kruger and his team examined Clara. They measured her height and weight, took samples of her hair and blood, and ran tests that no one in Maple Hollow had ever seen before. They asked Clara endless questions about her dreams, her memories, and her favorite foods. They watched her play, read, and even sleep. Clara was patient, but the attention was exhausting. She missed her quiet days in the garden, her walks with her father, her evenings reading by the fire. She felt like a specimen in a jar, poked and prodded by people who saw her as a puzzle, not a person. Dr. Kruger was kind, but he was also relentless. He filled page after page with notes, drew diagrams, and debated with his colleagues late into the night. He interviewed the family, the neighbors, and even Clara's childhood friends. He asked to see the marks on the wall where Samuel had measured Clara's height year after year. The townspeople watched with a mix of pride and anxiety. Some hoped that Dr. Kruger would bring fame and fortune to Maple Hollow. Others worried that the attention would bring trouble. A few resented the intrusion, wishing things could go back to the way they were. As the weeks passed, Dr. Kruger grew more frustrated. Every test came back normal. Clara was healthy, happy, and unchanged. There was no sign of disease, no evidence of trickery, no clue to explain her condition. At last, Dr. Kruger called a meeting in the Bell's parlor. The family, the townspeople, and even a few reporters gathered to hear his verdict. "There is no medical explanation," Dr. Kruger announced, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Clara Bell is a mystery that defies science." The room fell silent. Some people wept, others shook their heads. The reporters scribbled furiously, and knowing they had a story that would capture the world's imagination. The news spread like wildfire. Newspapers across the globe ran headlines about the girl who never grew old. Radio programs debated her case, and magazines published stories filled with speculation and wonder. People wrote letters, sent gifts, and even traveled thousands of miles just to catch a glimpse of Clara. For the Bells, the attention was overwhelming. Their quiet life was gone, replaced by a constant stream of visitors, reporters, and scientists. The phone rang day and night. The mailbox overflowed, and strangers camped outside their house, hoping for a glimpse of the famous child. Clara's parents did their best to protect her. They limited her time outside, kept the curtains drawn, and asked the neighbors to help keep watch. But the world was relentless. No matter what they did, the story kept growing. Clara felt the pressure most of all. She missed her old life, her friends, her freedom. She longed for the days when she could play in the garden without being watched, when she could walk through town without hearing whispers. She felt like a prisoner in her own home, trapped by a mystery she could not solve. The scientists who came after Dr. Kruger brought new machines, new tests, and new theories. Some believed Clara's secret was hidden in her DNA. Others thought it was a rare disease or a trick of the mind. A few even suggested that Clara was proof of something supernatural. But every test, every theory, led to the same dead end. Clara was healthy, normal, and unchanged. She laughed at the scientists' questions, played with their gadgets, and always asked if they wanted to join her for tea. Some scientists left frustrated, others inspired, but none left with answers. The attention took a toll on the family. Samuel grew weary, Edith grew anxious, and Clara grew more withdrawn. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now felt crowded and tense. The town, too, was changing. The old ways were fading, replaced by new ideas and new faces. But the story of Clara Bell remained, a living legend that no one could explain. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Clara sat on the porch with her mother. "Mama," she asked, "will they ever stop asking questions?" Edith hugged her tightly. "I don't know, Clara, but I do know that you are loved, just as you are." Clara smiled, but her heart was heavy. She wondered what her life would be like if she could grow, if she could change, if she could be like everyone else. As the chapter closes, the world's greatest minds have come and gone, but the mystery of Clara Bell remains unsolved. What will happen as the years pass and Clara stays the same? And what new questions will arise as the world continues to watch? In the next chapter, decades will pass. But Clara's secret will only grow deeper, and the world's fascination will turn to something even stranger. Even the greatest minds left Maple Hollow with more questions than answers. But what if the real secret wasn't in Clara's body, but in her past? And what did the townspeople know that they never dared to say out loud? Next, as decades pass, Clara's legend grows, and so do the dangers of being different. Subscribe to Sanctified Secrets and follow the story as it takes a turn no one expected. The passing years. The years after Dr. Kruger's visit passed slowly for the Bell family, but for the rest of the world time seemed to race forward. The 1920s brought jazz music, new inventions, and a sense of hope after the darkness of war. The 1930s brought hardship and uncertainty as the Great Depression swept across the country. Through it all, Maple Hollow changed, grew, and adapted. But inside the yellow house at the edge of town, one thing remained the same. Clara Bell. Clara was, by all appearances, still 8 years old. Her hair was the same length, her face unchanged, her voice as light and musical as ever. She wore the same size shoes, the same style of dresses, and her favorite yellow ribbon never seemed to wear out. The world outside her window changed with every season, but Clara did not. For her parents, the passing years were bittersweet. Samuel's hair turned gray. His hands grew rougher, and his back began to ache after long days in the workshop. Edith's face grew lined with worry, her eyes a little dimmer each year. They watched their friends grow old, their neighbors move away, and their own bodies betray them. But Clara remained a child, untouched by time. The emotional toll was heavy. Samuel and Edith loved their daughter fiercely, but they could not help but wonder what her future would hold. Would she always be a child? Would she ever grow up, fall in love, or have a family of her own? Would she outlive them, alone in a world that could never understand her? Clara, for her part, tried to remain cheerful. She filled her days with books, music, and long walks in the garden. She learned to cook, to sew, and to paint. She wrote stories and poems, filling notebooks with her thoughts and dreams. But as the years passed, she felt the weight of her unchanging life more and more. Her friends from childhood were gone. Some had moved to distant cities, chasing dreams and building new lives. Others had married, had children, and grown old. A few had passed away, their names now spoken only in whispers and memories. Clara missed them all, but she missed the feeling of belonging most of all. The town of Maple Hollow changed too. New families moved in, old houses were torn down, and the main street was paved for the first time. The general store became a grocery, the blacksmith shop a garage. The world was moving forward, but the Bell house remained a place where time stood still. As the decades passed, the story of Clara Bell became legend. Children whispered about her as they walked past the house, daring each other to peek through the fence. Teenagers told stories about the girl who never grew old, adding their own twists and embellishments. Some said she was a witch, others a fairy, and a few believed she was a ghost. Clara heard the stories, but she did not let them bother her. She knew who she was, even if the world did not. She found comfort in her family, in her books, and in the quiet beauty of her garden. But the world outside was not so easily satisfied. Reporters still came, though less often than before. Scientists wrote letters asking for samples, for interviews, for answers. Some sent gifts, strange machines, books, and even toys. Clara thanked them politely, but she had grown tired of being a curiosity. Her parents worried about what would happen when they were gone. They wrote letters to doctors, to scientists, to anyone who might help. They asked neighbors to look after Clara, to keep her safe. But no one had an answer. One winter, Samuel fell ill. He spent weeks in bed, his strength fading with each passing day. Clara sat by his side, reading to him, holding his hand and telling him stories. Edith did her best to care for them both, but the worry in her eyes grew deeper every day. On a cold February morning, Samuel passed away. The town mourned with the Bells, but Clara felt the loss most of all. Her father had been her protector, her teacher, her friend. Without him, the world felt colder, emptier. Edith tried to be strong for Clara, but the years of worry and grief had taken their toll. She grew frail, her hands trembling as she worked in the kitchen. Clara did her best to care for her mother, cooking meals, cleaning the house, and reading to her by the fire. As the years passed, Edith's health declined. She spent more and more time in bed, her voice growing weaker with each passing day. Clara stayed by her side, holding her hand and singing her favorite songs. One spring morning, Edith passed away, her hand in Clara's, her last words a whisper of love and hope. Clara was alone. The town rallied around her, bringing food, offering help, and checking in on her every day. Mrs. Parker, a kind neighbor, took Clara in, treating her like a granddaughter. Clara was grateful for the kindness, but she felt the loss of her parents deeply. She missed their laughter, their stories, their love. The world outside continued to change. Radios became televisions, cars became faster, and people traveled farther than ever before. But Clara remained the same, a living mystery in a world that could not explain her. Scientists still came, though less often than before. They brought new machines, new tests, and new theories. Some believed Clara's secret was hidden in her DNA. Others thought it was a rare disease or a trick of the mind. A few even suggested that Clara was proof of something supernatural. But every test, every theory, led to the same dead end. Clara was healthy, normal, and unchanged. She laughed at the scientists' questions, played with their gadgets, and always asked if they wanted to join her for tea. Some scientists left frustrated, others inspired, but none left with answers. Clara's legend grew. She became a symbol of hope, of wonder, and of the mysteries that still exist in the world. People wrote books about her, made radio shows, and even a few early television programs. Her story was told in classrooms, in churches, and around dinner tables. But for Clara, life was quieter. She spent her days in the garden, reading, writing, and watching the world go by. She made friends with the children of the new families, played with their pets, and helped Mrs. Parker with chores. She found joy in the small moments: sunsets, the sound of rain, the smell of fresh bread. As the years passed, Clara grew more thoughtful. She wondered about her place in the world, about the meaning of her unchanging life. She wrote letters to her old friends, to the scientists who had tried to help, to anyone who might listen. She asked questions, shared her dreams, and offered words of comfort to those who were struggling. But the mystery of Clara Bell remained unsolved. As the chapter closes, decades have passed, but Clara's secret has only grown deeper. The world has changed, but Clara remains the same. What new questions will arise as the world continues to watch? And what will happen as science advances, bring new hope and new challenges to the girl who never grew old? In the next chapter, the world's brightest minds return with new technology. But the mystery only grows deeper. Don't look away now. The real story is just beginning. Time moved on, but Clara did not. What toll did her unchanging childhood take on her family and on herself? And what would happen when science ran out of explanations? In the next chapter, the world's brightest minds return with new technology, but the mystery only grows deeper. Don't look away now. The real story is just beginning. The Science of Wonder. By the 1940s, Clara Bell's story had become more than a local legend. It was a riddle that had stumped the world's greatest minds for decades. As science advanced, so did the hope that someone somewhere would finally solve the mystery of the girl who never grew old. The world was changing rapidly. The radio brought news from distant lands, and the first televisions flickered in living rooms across America. Scientists were making discoveries that would have seemed like magic just a generation before. Penicillin, X-rays, and even the secrets of the atom were being unlocked. If science could split the atom, surely it could explain Clara Bell. It was in this spirit of progress that a new wave of scientists arrived in Maple Hollow. They came from universities, hospitals, and research institutes, each bringing their own theories and tools. Some were young and eager. Others were seasoned experts with reputations built on solving the unsolvable. Clara, now a legend in her own right, greeted them with the same polite patience she had shown for years. She was still, by all appearances, 8 years old. Her hair was the same length, her eyes the same bright blue, her laughter as light as ever. She wore the same style of dress, the same yellow ribbon, and her favorite shoes, now carefully mended by Mrs. Parker, still fit perfectly. The scientists brought with them new machines and new ideas. They took X-rays of Clara's bones, hoping to find a clue in her skeleton. They drew her blood and examined it under powerful microscopes. searching for a genetic marker or a rare disease. They measured her reflexes, her hearing, her eyesight, and even her sense of taste. Some believed that Clara's secret was hidden in her DNA, a code that had somehow frozen her in time. Others thought it was a rare hormonal disorder, something that modern medicine might finally be able to treat. A few whispered about the supernatural, about curses and miracles, but most were determined to find a scientific explanation. Clara answered their questions patiently, but she found the endless tests exhausting. She missed the quiet days in the garden, the evenings spent reading by the fire, and the simple joys of her old life. She wondered if she would ever be more than a curiosity, a puzzle for others to solve. The scientist interviewed Mrs. Parker, who had become Clara's guardian after her parents passed away. Mrs. Parker spoke of Clara's kindness, her intelligence, and her gentle spirit. "She's a blessing," Mrs. Parker said, her eyes shining with pride. "She's taught me more about life than anyone else ever could." The townspeople, too, were interviewed. Some spoke of their memories of Clara as a child, others of the years that had passed without her changing. A few admitted to being afraid, to wondering if Clara was a sign or a warning, but most spoke of her with affection and respect. One scientist, Dr. Helen Morris, became particularly close to Clara. Dr. Morris was a geneticist from New York known for her work on rare diseases. She spent weeks in Maple Hollow talking with Clara, reading her stories, and even teaching her how to play chess. "Clara is remarkable," Dr. Morris wrote in her journal. "She is intelligent, curious, and kind. She asks questions that most adults never think to ask. But her body is a mystery. Every test comes back normal. She is in every way a healthy 8-year-old. But she has been 8 for more than 30 years. Dr. Morris tried every test she could think of. She compared Clara's DNA to that of other children, looking for differences. She studied her hormones, her metabolism, and her immune system. She even consulted with experts in Europe and Asia, hoping that someone, somewhere, would have seen a case like Clara's before. But every lead turned into a dead end. Clara's DNA was normal. Her hormones were normal. Her body was, in every measurable way, that of a healthy child. Dr. Morris grew frustrated, but she also grew fond of Clara. They spent long afternoons talking about books, about dreams, and about the mysteries of life. Clara asked Dr. Morris about her own childhood, about her family, and about the world outside Maple Hollow. "Do you ever wish you could stay a child forever?" Clara asked one day, her eyes wide with curiosity. Dr. Morris smiled. "Sometimes I do, but I think growing up is important too. It's how we learn, how we change." Clara nodded thoughtfully. "I wonder what it would be like to change." The other scientists were less patient. Some grew frustrated with the lack of progress, blaming each other or the town for their failure. A few accused the Bells of hiding something, of playing a trick on the world. But the townspeople knew better. They had watched Clara for decades. There was no trick, no secret. Just a mystery that no one could solve. As the weeks turned into months, the scientists began to leave. Some published papers, others gave lectures, but none had an answer. Clara remained unchanged and unchanging, a living riddle that defied explanation. The world outside Maple Hollow continued to change. The war ended. Soldiers came home, and the country entered a new era of hope and prosperity. But inside the yellow house, time stood still. Clara found comfort in her routines. She read new books, learned new skills, and made friends with the children of the new families in town. She played with their pets, helped with their homework, and listened to their stories. She became a beloved figure in Maple Hollow, a symbol of kindness and wonder. But she also felt the weight of her unchanging life. She watched as her friends grew up, moved away, and started families of their own. She attended weddings, held babies, and said goodbye to those who passed on. She wondered what her own future would hold, if she would ever grow up, fall in love, or have a family of her own. The scientists who visited Maple Hollow left behind more than just unanswered questions. They left behind a sense of wonder, a belief that the world was still full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. They inspired a new generation of doctors, researchers, and dreamers, all hoping to solve the riddle of Clara Bell. Clara herself became a symbol of hope. People wrote letters to her asking for advice, for comfort, for inspiration. She replied to as many as she could, offering words of kindness and encouragement. "Dear Clara," one letter began, "my daughter is sick and the doctors don't know what to do. Your story gives me hope that miracles are possible." Clara wrote back, "Never lose hope. The world is full of wonders, and sometimes the answers we seek are closer than we think." As the chapter closes, the mystery of Clara Bell remains unsolved. Science has advanced, but the riddle has only grown deeper. What new questions will arise as the world continues to watch? And what will happen as Clara's story inspires a new generation to search for answers? In the next chapter, the town faces a burden it never asked for, and Clara's life changes in ways no one could predict. Subscribe and keep watching, because the most emotional chapter is yet to come. Machines, tests, and theories couldn't solve the riddle of Clara Bell. But what if the answer was something no scientist could ever measure? And what did Clara herself think about her endless childhood? Next, the town faces a burden it never asked for, and Clara's life changes in ways no one could predict. Subscribe and keep watching, because the most emotional chapter is yet to come. The town's burden. By the late 1940s, Clara Bell was no longer just a legend in Maple Hollow. She was a legend everywhere. Her name had appeared in newspapers, on radio broadcasts, and even in the first flickering images of television. People from all over the world sent letters, gifts, and sometimes even their own children, hoping for a miracle or an answer. But for the people of Maple Hollow, Clara was not a curiosity. She was a neighbor, a friend, and for many, a reminder that the world could be both wonderful and deeply confusing. The attention, however, was not always welcome. The town's quiet streets were often crowded with strangers. Reporters camped outside the Bell house, hoping for a glimpse of Clara or a new quote from Mrs. Parker. Tourists snapped photos, sometimes even peering through the windows. The local sheriff, a patient man named Tom Grady, spent more time than he liked asking outsiders to respect the family's privacy. Some townsfolk grew resentful. They blamed the Bells for the unwanted fame, for the way their town had changed. "We used to be a peaceful play, grumbled Mr. Jenkins, the grocer. "Now we're a sideshow." Others worried about Clara's safety, especially as stories of obsessed fans and would-be miracle seekers began to circulate. But there were also those who saw Clara as a blessing. Mrs. Parker, who had become Clara's guardian after her parents passed, often said, "She's a gift, and we're lucky to have her." The children of Maple Hollow adored Clara. She played with them in the park, helped them with their homework, and listened to their stories with genuine interest. To them, she was not strange. She was simply Clara. Still, the burden of fame weighed heavily on the town. The mayor called a meeting at the town hall to discuss what should be done. The room was packed, the air thick with worry and frustration. "We can't go on like this," said Mrs. Evans, a teacher at the local school. "Clara deserves a normal life." "But what is normal for Clara?" asked Reverend Thompson. "She's not like anyone else. We have to protect her." Some suggested sending Clara away to a hospital or a research institute where she could be studied in peace. Others argued that she belonged in Maple Hollow with the people who loved her. The debate grew heated, with voices rising and tempers flaring. Clara, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the room, stood up. Her voice was soft but steady. "I want to stay here," she said. "This is my home." The room fell silent. For a moment, everyone remembered that Clara was not just a mystery. She was a person, with feelings and dreams of her own. After the meeting, Mrs. Parker hugged Clara tightly. "You're very brave," she whispered. Clara smiled, but inside she felt a growing sense of loneliness. She missed her parents, missed the days when her life was simple. She wondered if she would ever truly belong, or if she would always be an outsider in her own town. As the years passed, the burden on Maple Hollow grew heavier. The town's economy changed, with some businesses thriving on the influx of visitors and others struggling to keep up. The local school added lessons about Clara to the curriculum, teaching children about genetics, aging, and the mysteries of the human body. Some parents worried that their children would become obsessed with the idea of never growing old. Clara tried to live as normal a life as possible. She helped Mrs. Parker with chores, volunteered at the library, and joined the church choir. She made friends with new families, played with their children, and offered comfort to those who were struggling. She became a source of wisdom and kindness, someone people turned to for advice. But Clara also felt the weight of her unchanging life. She watched as her friends grew up, moved away, and started families of their own. She attended weddings, held babies, and said goodbye to those who passed on. She wondered what her own future would hold, if she would ever grow up, fall in love, or have a family of her own. The scientists who visited Maple Hollow left behind more than just unanswered questions. They left behind a sense of wonder, a belief that the world was still full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. They inspired a new generation of doctors, researchers, and dreamers, all hoping to solve the riddle of Clara Bell. But not all the attention was positive. Some visitors were rude, demanding, or even threatening. A few tried to sneak into the Bell house at night, hoping to catch Clara off guard. The sheriff increased patrols, and the townspeople took turns keeping watch. One night, Clara woke to find a stranger standing in her garden, staring up at her window. She called for Mrs. Parker, who called the sheriff. The man was arrested, but the incident left Clara shaken. She realized that her life would never be truly private, that she would always be watched, always be judged. Mrs. Parker did her best to protect Clara, but she was growing older too. Her hair turned gray, her steps slowed, and her memory sometimes failed her. Clara worried about what would happen when Mrs. Parker was gone. Who would take care of her? Would she be sent away, studied like a specimen, or left alone in a world that could never understand her? The town debated what to do. Some suggested forming a committee to look after Clara to make sure she was safe and cared for. Others argued that she should be sent to a hospital where she could be studied by experts. The debate raged on with no easy answers. Clara, for her part, tried to remain hopeful. She found comfort in her routines, in the kindness of her friends, and in the beauty of the world around her. She wrote letters to her old friends, to the scientists who had tried to help, to anyone who might listen. She asked questions, shared her dreams, and offered words of comfort to those who were struggling. But the burden of fame was heavy. Clara longed for a life where she could simply be herself without the weight of the world's curiosity pressing down on her. As Mrs. Parker's health declined, Clara took on more responsibilities. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, and cared for her guardian with patience and love. She worried about the future, but she tried to stay strong. One spring morning, Mrs. Parker passed away, her hand in Clara's, her last words a whisper of love and hope. Clara was alone once more. The town rallied around her, bringing food, offering help, and checking in on her every day. But Clara felt the loss deeply. She missed Mrs. Parker's laughter, her stories, her love. The world outside continued to change. Radios became televisions, cars became faster, and people traveled farther than ever before. But Clara remained the same, a living mystery in a world that could not explain her. As the chapter closes, Clara faces a future filled with uncertainty. The town debates her fate, the world watches, and Clara herself wonders what will become of her. The burden of being different has never felt heavier. In the next chapter, Clara's world grows smaller, but her legend only grows larger. What did she think about the life she'd lived, and the questions she could never answer? Next, the world moves on, but Clara's story remains. The final chapters will reveal the legacy she left behind and the questions that still haunt science today. Subscribe now to Sanctified Secrets. Fame brought strangers, but it also brought danger. As the world's eyes turned to Maple Hollow, who would protect Clara when her parents were gone? And what would happen when she was left alone? In the next chapter, loss and loneliness tests Clara's spirit, and the world begins to forget. But the mystery refuses to die. Stay tuned for the chapter that will break your heart. The Final Days. After Mrs. Parker's passing, Clara Bell's world changed in ways she could never have imagined. The yellow house at the edge of Maple Hollow, once filled with laughter, stories, and the comforting routines of daily life, now felt impossibly quiet. For the first time in her long, unchanging life, Clara was truly alone. The town, sensing her vulnerability, rallied around her. Neighbors brought meals, checked in on her, and offered to help with chores. The church organized a schedule so that someone would visit Clara every day, making sure she was never left without company for too long. Children from the neighborhood would stop by after school, bringing her flowers, drawings, and stories from their day. In many ways, Clara became the heart of Maple Hollow, a living legend, but also a cherished friend. Yet even with all this support, Clara felt the ache of loneliness more deeply than ever. She missed Mrs. Parker's gentle voice, her warm hugs, and the way she always knew just what to say. She missed her parents, too, and the simple days of her childhood, when the world was smaller and her life was filled with certainty. Clara spent long hours in the garden, tending to the flowers and vegetables that Mrs. Parker had loved. She found comfort in the rhythm of planting, watering, and harvesting. The garden became her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the beauty of growing things, even as she herself remained unchanged. As the seasons passed, Clara began to reflect more deeply on her own existence. She kept a journal, filling its pages with her thoughts, questions, and memories. She wrote about her parents, about Mrs. Parker, about the scientists and reporters who had come and gone. She wrote about the children she had played with, the friends she had lost, and the town that had both protected and burdened her. One entry read, "Sometimes I wonder if I am meant to be a lesson for others. People come from far away to see me, to ask their questions, to search for answers. But I have no answers to give. I am just Clara, living each day as it comes, loving the people around me and hoping that I am more than just a mystery." Clara's reflections were often tinged with sadness, but they were also filled with hope. She found meaning in the small acts of kindness she could offer, listening to a neighbor's troubles, helping a child with homework, or simply sharing a smile with someone who needed it. She became a source of comfort and wisdom for many in Maple Hollow, her gentle presence a reminder that life's greatest mysteries are sometimes best met with patience and love. The world outside Maple Hollow continued to change at a dizzying pace. New inventions appeared. Televisions, telephones, even the first computers. People traveled farther and faster than ever before. But Clara's life remained rooted in the rhythms of the town, the turning of the seasons, and the quiet joys of everyday life. Scientists still visited from time to time, though less frequently than before. They brought new machines, new tests, and new theories. Some believed that advances in genetics or medicine might finally unlock the secret of Clara's unchanging body. Others came simply to see her, to witness the living legend for themselves. Clara welcomed them with her usual patience and kindness. She answered their questions, submitted to their tests, and listened to their theories. But she no longer expected answers. She had come to accept that her life was a mystery, one that might never be solved. One scientist, Dr. Patel, visited from India. He was gentle and respectful, spending hours talking with Clara about her life, her thoughts, and her dreams. He asked her what she wished for most. Clara thought for a long moment before answering. "I wish for peace," she said softly, "for myself, for the people I love, and for everyone who has ever wondered about me. I wish for people to find comfort in the unknown and to remember that life is precious, even when it doesn't make sense." Dr. Patel smiled and nodded. "That is a wise wish, Clara. Perhaps that is your true gift to the world." As the years passed, Clara's legend continued to grow. Books were written about her, documentaries were filmed, and her story was taught in schools and universities. She became a symbol of hope, of wonder, and of the enduring mysteries that make life beautiful. But for Clara, life was lived one day at a time. She found joy in the laughter of children, in the beauty of a sunset, in the taste of fresh bread, and in the kindness of friends. She learned to cherish the moments she had, even as she wondered what the future might hold. Clara's health remained perfect. She never caught a cold, never suffered from aches or pains, never showed any sign of aging. Doctors marveled at her resilience, but Clara took it in stride. She was grateful for her health, but she sometimes wished she could grow old like everyone else. One autumn, as the leaves turned gold and red, Clara sat in her garden with a group of children. They asked her to tell them a story, and she obliged, weaving a tale of adventure, friendship, and the magic of believing in yourself. When she finished, one little girl asked, "Clara, do you ever get scared?" Clara smiled gently. "Of course I do. Everyone gets scared sometimes. But I've learned that it's okay to be afraid. What matters is that we keep going, that we keep loving, and that we never stop hoping." The children hugged her, and Clara felt a warmth in her heart that chased away the loneliness, if only for a little while. As the chapter closes, Clara's world has grown smaller, but her legend has grown larger. She has become a symbol of hope and wonder, a reminder that life's greatest mysteries are sometimes best left unsolved. The world moves on, but Clara's story remains, a legacy of kindness, patience, and the enduring power of the unknown. In the next chapter, decades will pass, but the mystery of Clara Bell will only deepen. What did she know that she never told? And could her story hold the key to secrets we still don't understand? In the final chapter, we explore the legacy of the girl who never grew old, and invite you to share your own theory. Don't miss the ending that will leave you questioning everything. Clara's world grew smaller, but her legend only grew larger. What did she think about the life she'd lived, and the questions she could never answer? Next, the world moves on, but Clara's story remains. The final chapters will reveal the legacy she left behind, and the questions that still haunt science today. Subscribe now to Sanctified Secrets, the unanswered mystery. As the years slipped by, Clara Bell's story became more than a legend. It became a question that haunted everyone who heard it. By the 1960s, Clara had been 8 years old for more than 50 years. She had outlived her parents, her guardian, and most of her childhood friends. The world outside Maple Hollow had changed in ways no one could have imagined. But inside the yellow house, time seemed to stand still. Clara's days were quiet, filled with the gentle routine she had come to cherish. She woke with the sun, tended her garden, and spent her afternoons reading or writing in her journal. She welcomed visitors with a smile, listened to their stories, and offered words of comfort or encouragement. She became a confidant to many in Maple Hollow, a source of wisdom and kindness that people sought out in times of trouble. But as the years passed, Clara's world grew smaller. The children she had once played with were now grandparents themselves. The town's oldest residents remembered her as a child, but the younger generations knew her only as the girl who never grew old. A living legend, but also a mystery that no one could explain. Scientists still came, though less often than before. They brought new machines, new tests, and new theories. Some believed that advances in genetics or medicine might finally unlock the secret of Clara's unchanging body. Others came simply to see her, to witness the living legend for themselves. One team of researchers from a prestigious university arrived with the latest technology, machines that could map every gene, scan every cell, and analyze every molecule. They spent weeks in Maple Hollow, running tests, collecting samples, and interviewing everyone who had ever known Clara. Clara submitted to their tests with her usual patience, but she no longer expected answers. She had come to accept that her life was a mystery, one that might never be solved. She found comfort in the kindness of her friends, the beauty of her garden, and the simple joys of everyday life. The researchers left with stacks of data but no explanation. Clara's DNA was normal. Her cells divided and functioned just like any other child's. There was no sign of disease, no evidence of a genetic mutation, no clue to explain her unchanging body. The world's greatest minds had come and gone, but the mystery of Clara Bell remained unsolved. As the years passed, Clara's story was told and retold in books, newspapers, and on television. She became a symbol of hope, of wonder, and of the enduring mysteries that make life beautiful. People wrote letters to her asking for advice, for comfort, for inspiration. She replied to as many as she could, offering words of kindness and encouragement. "Dear Clara," one letter began, "my son is sick, and the doctors don't know what to do. Your story gives me hope that miracles are possible." Clara wrote back, "Never lose hope. The world is full of wonders, and sometimes the answers we seek are closer than we think." But even as her legend grew, Clara's own life became quieter. She spent more time in her garden, less time with visitors. She cherished the moments she had, even as she wondered what the future might hold. One winter, Clara fell ill for the first time in her life. It was a simple cold, but it lingered longer than usual. The town's doctor, now an old friend, visited every day, bringing soup and stories to cheer her up. The townspeople took turns sitting with her, reading to her, and keeping her company. Clara recovered, but the experience left her feeling more fragile than before. She realized that even she was not immune to the passage of time, that her life, though extraordinary, was still finite. As the years passed, Clara began to reflect more deeply on her own existence. She wrote letters to her old friends, to the scientists who had tried to help, to anyone who might listen. She asked questions, shared her dreams, and offered words of comfort to those who were struggling. But the mystery of Clara Bell remained unsolved. In her final years, Clara became a symbol of hope and wonder for people all over the world. Her story was taught in schools and universities, discussed in scientific journals, and featured in documentaries and news programs. She became a source of inspiration for doctors, researchers, and dreamers, all hoping to solve the riddle of the girl who never grew old. But for Clara, life was lived one day at a time. She found joy in the laughter of children, in the beauty of a sunset, in the taste of fresh bread, and in the kindness of friends. She learned to cherish the moments she had, even as she wondered what the future might hold. One spring morning, Clara passed away quietly in her sleep. She was still, by all appearances, 8 years old. The town of Maple Hollow mourned her passing, and people from all over the world sent flowers and letters. Her funeral was attended by everyone in town, as well as scientists, reporters, and admirers from far and wide. The church was filled with flowers, and the air was thick with the scent of lilacs and roses. The townspeople shared stories of Clara's kindness, her wisdom, and her gentle spirit. The scientists who had studied Clara for decades paid their respects, some leaving notes and small tokens at her grave. They spoke of her as a living miracle, a mystery that had changed the way they thought about life, aging, and the limits of science. After her passing, the world's greatest minds made one last attempt to solve the mystery of Clara Bell. They studied her medical records, her DNA, and every piece of data ever collected. But the answer remained elusive. Some said she was a miracle, others a curse. A few believed she was a sign from another world. But Clara herself never claimed to know the truth. Her story became a legend, a reminder that the world is still full of secrets, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things can happen in the most ordinary places. As the chapter closes, the mystery of Clara Bell remains unsolved. Decades have passed, but her secret has only grown deeper. The world has changed, but Clara's story remains a legacy of kindness, patience, and the enduring power of the unknown. In the final chapter, we explore the legacy of the girl who never grew old and invite you to share your own theory. Don't miss the ending that will leave you questioning everything. Decades passed, but the mystery of Clara Bell only deepened. What did she know that she never told? And could her story hold the key to secrets we still don't understand? In the final chapter, we explore the legacy of the girl who never grew old and invite you to share your own theory. Don't miss the ending that will leave you questioning everything. The legacy of Clara Bell. The story of Clara Bell did not end with her passing. In many ways, it only grew larger, echoing through the years and across the world. The girl who never grew old became more than a legend. She became a symbol, a question, and a gentle challenge to everything we think we know about life, time, and the mysteries that shape us all. After Clara's funeral, Maple Hollow felt both emptier and more connected than ever before. The yellow house at the edge of town, once filled with laughter and the quiet routines of daily life, became a place of pilgrimage. People came from distant cities and foreign countries, leaving flowers at the gate, notes tucked into the fence, and sometimes just a moment of silent reflection. The garden Clara had tended for so many years bloomed brighter than ever, as if the earth itself remembered her gentle touch. The townspeople, who had once struggled with the burden of Clara's fame, now found comfort in her memory. They told stories about her kindness, her patience, and the way she always seemed to know just what to say. Children grew up hearing tales of the girl who never changed, and parents reminded them that sometimes the greatest mysteries are the ones that teach us the most about love and acceptance. Clara's journals, discovered after her death, became a source of wonder and inspiration. In page after page, she wrote about her hopes, her fears, and her dreams. She wrote about the people she loved, the questions she could never answer, and the beauty she found in the world around her. Her words were simple, but they carried a wisdom that touched everyone who read them. One entry, written just a few months before her passing, read, "I have lived many years as a child, but I have seen more of life than most. I have learned that kindness is the greatest gift, that patience is a kind of strength, and that love is the only thing that truly lasts. I do not know why I never grew old, but I am grateful for every day I have been given. If my life is a mystery, let it be a reminder that the world is full of wonders, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is simply cherish them." Clara's story inspired countless people. Writers, artists, and musicians created works in her honor, novels, paintings, songs, and even films. Scientists continued to study her case, hoping that one day her secret might help others. Teachers used her story to spark curiosity in their students, to remind them that science is not just about answers, but about the courage to ask questions. But perhaps the greatest legacy Clara left behind was the way she changed the people around her. The children who had played in her garden grew up to be doctors, teachers, and parents themselves. They carried her lessons with them, teaching their own children to be kind, to be patient, and to never stop wondering. Maple Hollow, once a quiet town overshadowed by a single, unexplainable story, became a place known for its warmth and its open heart. The townspeople learned to welcome visitors, to share their memories, and to celebrate the mystery that had brought them together. The annual Clara Bell Day, held every spring, became a time for music, laughter, and stories, a day to remember the girl who had touched so many lives. Scientists, too, found meaning in Clara's legacy. Though her case remained unsolved, it inspired new fields of research, from genetics to aging to the study of rare diseases. Conferences were held in her name, and young researchers often cited her story as the reason they chose their path. Clara became a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that science is a journey, not a destination. But for those who had known her best, Clara's legacy was something quieter and more personal. It was the memory of her laughter, the warmth of her smile, and the way she listened, truly listened, to everyone she met. It was the way she found joy in the smallest things, and the way she offered comfort without ever needing to solve the mystery of her own life. As the years passed, the world changed in ways Clara could never have imagined. New technologies emerged, new discoveries were made, and the pace of life grew ever faster. But the story of Clara Bell remained, a gentle reminder that some questions are worth asking, even if they have no answer. People continued to visit Maple Hollow, to walk the paths Clara had walked, to sit in her garden and wonder about the girl who never grew old. Some came seeking answers, others came seeking hope. All left with a sense of wonder and a renewed belief in the beauty of the unknown. Clara's story became a part of the world's collective memory, a legend that crossed borders, languages, and generations. It was told in classrooms, in churches, around dinner tables, and in quiet moments of reflection. It was a story that invited everyone who heard it to ask, what would you do if you met a child who never aged? Would you seek answers or simply accept the wonder? In the end, Clara's greatest gift was not the mystery of her unchanging body, but the way she taught people to see the world with curiosity, with kindness, and with an open heart. She reminded everyone that life is precious, that every day is a gift, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen in the most ordinary places. As the sun sets over Maple Hollow, the garden Clara loved is filled with the laughter of children, the scent of blooming flowers, and the gentle hum of life moving forward. The yellow house stands as a quiet monument to a life well lived, a life that, though shrouded in mystery, was filled with love, hope, and the enduring power of wonder. And so the story of Clara Bell lives on, a legacy of kindness, patience, and the beautiful, haunting question that will never be fully answered. Clara's story ends, but the questions linger. What would you do if you met a child who never aged? Would you seek answers or simply accept the wonder? If this story left you with chills, share your thoughts below. For more haunting mysteries and untold secrets, subscribe to Sanctified Secrets. There are many more stories waiting to be uncovered, some even stranger than this one.